It's time to get educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. This is the Dr. Duke Show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show. We got a great show for you today, so please hit that share button and keep us growing. Today, we have something special planned for you. Katie and I are unveiling our selections for the best and worst of American public schools in 2021, the year that just passed. We have painstakingly gone through the archives and selected the top contenders. Katie and I will each make our case for the winner of each category, and we'll let our trusted audience be the final vote. We start with our first category of the day, Best and Worst School Board Moment. Katie, you have the honors of kicking things off with your pick for this best school board moment.
All right, well, it was quite contentious for more so the worst school board moment because there were plenty of bad ones, but for best school board moment, I think what hit, the best nail on the head is that, who, as most of the time it was parents standing in front of the school boards, it wasn't the school boards themselves doing anything, who best spoke what everyone in the whole country was thinking, and it was none other than Colorado Springs District 49 in Colorado, where they decided to ban critical race theory on a vote of 3-2 after a black father named Derek Wilburn gave a speech about how racism would basically be dead if the institutions weren't the ones trying to keep it on life support. Take a look.
Putting critical race theory into our classrooms is taking our nation in the wrong direction. Racism in America would by and large be dead today if it were not for certain people and institutions keeping it on life support. And sadly, very sadly, one of those institutions is the American education system. I can think of nothing more damaging to a society than to tell a baby born today that she has grievances against another baby born today simply because of what their ancestors may have done 2 centuries ago.
Boom. Nice job, Derek.
In fact, I think that is such a wonderful clip that it's the one I picked too. Yes, indeed.
How did you pick that one?
That was mine as well.
Cheater.
I think we both thought the same thing. What gives this clip such street cred, obviously, is you have an African-American father with African-American kids. He talks about how his entire family at one point had been enslaved. His grandparents and his great-grandparents, all of them had been enslaved either in Alabama and Texas. He's aware of the racial history. He's aware of what his ancestors had to do to become equal in this country. He's also aware of just how much opportunity he and his kids now have because of it. And what I love about his statement here, whenever I give talks on critical race theory across the country, that's the first thing I try to convince parents. This isn't about black and white. It's really not about race. Critical race theory is a tool being used to push socialist agendas on our country. It's really not about race. And when you have a articulate man like that stand up there and make the same point you're making, it makes my job a lot easier. So Katie and I actually agreed on that one. So my turn to talk about the worst school board moment and see what Katie picks. My pick for worst school board moment of the entire year was how Loudoun, Virginia public schools tried to conceal a sexual assault against a young girl in a bathroom. According to a father, and now we have evidence that it's true, a young girl was raped in the women's bathroom by a young boy who, while not claiming to be transgender, a young man about a year or two older than her who dressed in skirts and jewelry. He didn't claim to be a transgender. He just liked to wear women's clothing. On the basis of liking women's clothing, that was enough for the Loudoun School District to allow him into the girls' showers, where he raped not one, but 2 young girls.
Well, I'm sort of along that same line because I just couldn't narrow it down. The worst school board moment was every single Loudoun County school board meeting this past year, because we have that as one of the examples, because that dad got arrested at the school board meeting. We have the example of when all of the school board decided, oh, it's dangerous, so we're going to leave. They're just going to leave the meeting altogether. There's been basically when they wouldn't allow anyone to come into the meetings because they're scared then. And so you had to go in one by one, and you had to be in line ahead of time. If you wanted to speak, you had to go through security, get your name on there. You were given 60 seconds only to speak, and then they would literally cut the mic off on you. And I chose that, Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire was no better example to explain in that 1 minute that he was allowed to speak when he decided to quote unquote rent a room at a lady's house. He went in front of that school board and just laid on the Loudoun County School Board exactly everything that they'd been doing wrong.
I would thank you all for allowing me to speak to you tonight, but you tried not to allow it, yet here I am. Now, you only give us 60 seconds, so let me get to the point. You are all child abusers. You prey upon impressionable children and indoctrinate them into your insane ideological cult, a cult which holds many fanatical views, but none so deranged as the idea that boys are girls and girls are boys. By imposing this vile nonsense on students to the point even of forcing young girls to share locker rooms with boys, you deprive these kids of safety and privacy and something more fundamental too, which is truth. If education is not grounded in truth, then it is worthless. Worse, it is poison. You are poison. You are predators. I can see why you try to stop us from speaking. You know that your ideas are indefensible. You silence the opposing side because you have no argument. You can only hide under your beds like pathetic little gutless cowards hoping we shut up and go away. But we won't. I promise you that. Thank you for your time, and I'll talk to you again very, very soon.
Are you a fan of the show? Consider joining the Patriot Club. Your tax-deductible donation of $99 a year keeps us going. Simply visit patriotclub.us. That's patriotclub.us to pledge your support and receive our signature tumbler as a token of our appreciation. We've got much more to come. Stay with us.
We've had plenty to deal with the school boards for all of 2021. So let's just move on away from them to the best and the worst teachers of the year. Dr. Duke, who have you selected to be the best teacher in 2021?
With the teachers, this is one of those categories where you could go to all Time magazine and for the worst teacher, which is in this category as well, you could nominate every union teacher. But for the best teacher, I chose the teacher who quit her job in CRT and says her former colleagues should follow her out the door. Turns out that she got herself a really good job in private schools, actually, after she made her impassioned speech. This is a young teacher who stood before, again, Loudoun's school board and lectured them about their indoctrination, that she could no longer take it. She was not going to expose the most vulnerable children to your racially biased, bigoted curriculum. Take a look at the young lady as she gives her speech.
Clearly, you've made your point. You no longer value me or many other teachers you've employed in this county. So since my contract outlines the power that you have over my employment in Loudoun County Public Schools, I thought it necessary to resign in front of you. School board, I quit. I quit your policies, I quit your trainings, and I quit being a cog in a machine that tells me to push highly politicized agendas on our most vulnerable constituents, the children.
And if I had to go 1A, it was hard to describe between that one and also from that school district, the young coach who refused to play the transgender game, got himself fired, and then rehired by court fiat. That would be my 1 and 1A, Katie.
That was Tanner Cross who did that. I remember his name.
Yes, Tanner Cross.
Because those two were in my top 3, but my number 1 spot actually went to Josiah Enyart, who actually resigned after his school required masks for unvaccinated teachers, plus this pushing of critical race theory that they've been doing forever and ever. He's from Kansas. He was a 6th grade math teacher from the Shawnee Mission School District, and this story was back in the middle of August. Now, the reason I picked him, and Mom and Dad, you may be sitting at home going, of course they pick teachers who quit because they hate public schools. No, as you see, Laura went and became a private school teacher, and now Josiah decided, hey, I'm going to kind of open almost like a mini homeschooling co-op to help all the students out there, because he was going to stay home and then teach his own children, because he's not going to just quit and then leave his kids there. So, of course, he had to when he left the school, they were going to make him pay $1,000. So one of his friends started a GoFundMe to pay that $1,000 because it's, getting out of his contract, or liquidation penalty, they called it. That GoFundMe for the $1,000 fine got up to $27,585. And Josiah said that he's agreed to educate kids in his own home for the coming year. He's going to take on more kids, begin the homeschooling co-op, because Kansas doesn't have a charter school, and 100%, no exceptions, of monies raised will go to fund Josiah's mission. Kids need better options. Teachers need to know there is a way out. So he is still doing his job. So he is my best teacher in 2021.
Just a couple of weeks ago, they announced that kids K through 6th grade were going to have to wear a mask. And you were not planning on that, were you?
No, I wasn't. They told us back in the fall, they being everybody who just kind of talks, that we were hoping, or back in the summer and spring, that fall was going to be normal. We were going to be moving forward, So then when it came out, really the thing that got me was that my kids were going to have to and had no say. And so pulling them out was step one. And then realizing that the only way I can give them the education I wanted them to have was resigning.
And that's why he is the #1 best teacher of 2021. But from best to worst, let's take a look at who I picked to be the worst teacher. I just roll clip.
Okay, so during third period, we have announcements and they do the Pledge of Allegiance. Except for the fact that my room does not have a flag. It used to be there, but I took it down during COVID because it made me uncomfortable. And I packed it away and I don't know where, and I haven't found it yet. But my kid today goes, hey, it's kind of weird that we just stand and then, we say it to nothing. And I'm like, oh, well, I gotta find it. Like, I'm working on it. I got you. In the meantime, I tell this kid, we do have a flag in the class that you can pledge your allegiance to. And he looks around and he goes, oh, that one?
Kristen Pitson, she's the worst. I picked her as the worst teacher from the Newport Mesa Unified School District. She's supposed to be teaching English, and instead she's teaching all about how we should pledge allegiance to the pride flag instead of pledging allegiance to anything other than yourself.
Well, at one point, she was. I initially picked her and forgot. I did not ultimately pick her. So, but she would have been my number
You're
one.
number 2.
Very close.
She's
and the
number 2.
one that gets me is when she says, "I pledge allegiance to the queers," right?
Yes,
that's what
true.
she and that's the giggling. Let's be very blunt about this. To act like a sophomore who just got into your first sorority while you're dealing with the responsibility of teaching American kids. She says that the state mandates that they're supposed to have an American flag and they're supposed to stand for the pledge. She, on the other hand, told her kids, you can stand if you want to stand, sit and be quiet. If you want to be quiet, you don't have to say the pledge. In fact, so far did she go that she had removed, during the COVID period, she had removed, I think illegally, the American flag from her classroom. Why? Because it offended her. She was frightened about the American. As proud as she was as the LGBTQ flag, she was embarrassed and made uncomfortable by the stars and stripes, and all along giggling her way through. It's one thing to be a giggling idiot. It's another thing to be recruiting kids to the local chapter of Antifa. Yes, indeed. There is my choice for the worst teacher of the year, and perhaps the last 10 years. He's been teaching for 10 years in Sacramento, California. And his entire platform is that he is going to, quote unquote, scare the blank out of these kids and turn them into little fascists. He says, I have 188 class days every year to turn my children into revolutionaries. Not only does this guy got a gay flag in his classroom, no American flag like the last woman we saw, he also has a picture of Chairman Mao Zedong of the Communist Revolution in China, the biggest murderer, the biggest mass murderer, collective murderer in human history. In fact, for 10 years, moms and dads went to the school board trying to get this guy fired. He was anti-American. One of the things he did, stunning, He had a middle school kid come up to him and say, "Hey, your anti-flag makes me feel uncomfortable. At which point, the Mr. Gype, I name, as I think that's how you pronounce his name, Gype. He said, "That flag is there. The Antifa flag is flying in my classroom to make fascists feel uncomfortable. The fact that you feel uncomfortable, all I can tell you," he said to the kid, "is don't be a fascist, right? By supporting the United States of America. This is my guy." And after 10 years of complaining, school board did nothing. It took James O'Keefe and Project Veritas, undercover, had to go in to expose this guy before he got finally fired.
I have 180 days to turn them into revolutionaries.
How do you do that? How do you
Out of them. Sacramento organization that is under the banner of Antifa is very loosely organized, right? So that when there is like right-wing rallies and stuff, then we'll create an opposition to that. Yeah.
Beautiful. Where would he go to connect to some of these organizations?
I post a calendar every week, awesome. And then so and I do it for extra credit, so they get points for doing it. So that encourages them to do it. And I've had students show up for protests, community events, tabling, food distribution, all sorts of things. When they go, they take pictures, they write up a reflection. That's their extra credit. I have an Antifa flag on my wall, and a student complained about that. And he said it made him feel uncomfortable. Well, this is meant to make fascists feel uncomfortable, so if you feel uncomfortable, I don't really know what to tell you. Maybe you shouldn't be aligning with the values that this is antithetical to.
Today's show is sponsored by Clean Start Hand Sanitizer. For an odor-free foam hand sanitizer that lasts 2 hours and provides 19 refills, visit freedomproject.com/clean. That's KLEEN to order yours today.
As Eddie Kendricks once said, keep on trucking. We're going to move on to our next category, the most admired person or story, followed by the most cringeworthy. And Dr. Duke, who do you have for your most admired person or story?
My choice for most admirable person or story of the year is Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis. There has been no higher ranking member of the American elite, of the politicians of our culture, than a governor of a state who was the most vocal and the most thoughtful in trying to remove critical race theory for his state. He did everything he could. He used the legislature. He used the bully pulpit he had as governor. He fought the teachers' unions rather than Lori Lightfoot in Chicago, who plays lip service to fighting them. DeSantis has done everything really right in this battle so far. And even if he's not perfect, there is still critical race theory in Florida schools. The fact is that no one in this country at that level has fought this with anything like the gusto and the consistency of DeSantis. I would simply say, where are you, the rest of the Republican governors? There's a majority of Republican governors in this country, and why aren't you seconding, thirding, fourthing, and fifthing every single thing DeSantis is doing and saying, rather than hiding and ignoring this?
Now, my most admired person or story is actually the young girl who is the daughter of Tina and Shane Akers from Fishers, Indiana, when she so bravely stood up in front of her school board and asked them why the heck it is that they are teaching critical race theory and how she is actually having white privilege. This girl who came from a very broken home with abuse and just horrible living, to be adopted then by the Akers family. She actually was very brave in standing up to what they had to say.
I was told I have white privilege. How can a child born in an abusive drug and alcohol abuse home who lost her entire biological family that has experienced all forms of abuse and neglect be privileged? If you found a child at 15 months in a home with holes in the floor eating cat poop, would you consider them privileged? Just asking, because when I was told that, I was so upset I cried myself to sleep. We have to stop the stereotypes and bitterness towards groups because it gets us nowhere but divided. I have no friends and can say HST again has failed me. They are trying to divide us into two groups instead of bringing us together as one. Every day I felt less and less valued as a student and failed every class this past year. Academics are not important here, only how we feel and making sure we learn about sexuality, political topics, and emotional topics that teachers may or may not be able to handle, especially with trauma children like myself. I'm happy to move on and begin a fresh start and hope that this next school will love me for me and challenge me to grow in areas that I'm good at.
Well done, I think. I picked somebody at the very top of power. You picked somebody at the lowest level of power. And I think between two of them, they really are an admirable couple of stories. Now, one of my favorite is the most cringeworthy story from the schools of this year. And mine is Chicago Teachers Union Dance-A-Rama. You've got so-called dancing teachers. What gets me is when you watch them dance, the one thing you're going to say is they can't be dance teachers, right? I mean, these would be like mathematicians who didn't know how to add 8 plus 7. Because they're the worst dancers I think I've ever seen, and they're embarrassing, and yet they're dancing to protest against having to teach live classes because they're so very, very afraid of COVID. So take a look at the dancing fools of the Chicago Teachers Union. Most cringeworthy.
Make it make sense. Safety is essential. Keep our students and our teachers safe. Safe.
As bad as the dancing was, whoever that was in the hoodie standing up on the bridge, just flailing, might have more talent than all of them put together.
Well, speaking of talent,
cringy.
My most cringy person is what I selected is none other than Candace Reed, a former math teacher from John W. North High School in Riverside, California, who decided, dancing and tomahawk chopping and yelling "Sokotoa" was the only way that you could remember sine, cosine, and tangent in your class. So here she is. Sokotoa, 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 Soka, 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 Soka,
Water goddess, again, I ask you, please tell me the secret of the enchant.
Cringy. Let's take a break.
Today's show is sponsored by our friends at MyPillow. Save up to 66% on all items at MyPillow.com when you use the code Dr. Duke. That's DRDUKE. Support this show by supporting a great American company.
All right, we are on now. Drum roll, please. I'm sure our producer will add one. This is the category that ends our show. Story of the year, Katie. What was your number one education story for any reason for this year, 2021?
Well, it's quite interesting. Where we began this is where we're going to end. You pick your best, basically, moment and everything happening to be Loudoun County. I pick it to be my story of the year. Hands down, it's the summation of everything that happened this last school year. Loudoun County doing what they did to that father, and then to not believing the girl who was raped, and then just moving that boy who raped her to another school, so then he also sexually assaulted another female student. And how the school board reacted, how the administrators reacted, how the parents got pitted against everyone in school. It encompasses everything that has happened in this past year with schools.
Yeah, and I thought about that long and hard too. It is no doubt that that Loudoun County, Virginia schools are a perfect epitome or a summation of what went. I went one step further. What's the problem itself that they represent? To me, the single biggest story for the year is how finally the critical race theory agenda has been fully unmasked to the American people. Now, anybody paying attention now knows what's going on here. I think that there's a mob of people. I've given probably 40 talks in the state of Wisconsin over the last 6 months. I've been all over the state, rest of the states too, talking about this. There is an army of parents willing to fight back against critical race theory. That is something we never saw with Common Core. And so to me, all of these stories, the vast majority of the stories that we've covered here on the Dr. Duke Show over the past year were how the American education system was taken over by a racist socialist pedagogy.
Well, how'd we do, everyone? You let us know in the comments who your best and worst of everything we just talked about were, and we look forward to reading them. But now, before we go, we need to show some love to our Patriot Club members, and today, we're giving that shout out to Ryan from Manitowoc, Wisconsin. Ryan, just down the road, thank you for supporting us. And that wraps up this show. For Freedom Project, I'm Katie, he's Dr. Duke.
Ryan started the fire! Stay educated, my friends, and have a much better 2022 when it comes to education.